We're almost there. While Michael is downstairs right now hammering through 5.4 and 5.5 to try and catch up, I've been deep in the lore mines, and I've come out with what I can only describe as a brain full of spiders, and I really need to share them with you. So let's talk about what's coming in Endwalker, or rather, what might be coming. First of all, because I think it's the most important to most of us, what is going to happen to the Scions? Ishikawa at the FanFest said something along the lines of, "This is the curtain call, where we get to see important characters again, and she hopes we can fill our hearts with love as we say goodbye." Yoshi-P in an interview said that they don't necessarily feel like they need to kill off a character, but we will face difficulties, and instead, we should be focused on ourselves and our companions, combining our power and our energy to face the end that's coming. Now, personally, based on this, I don't think we have anything to fear regarding death. The writers aren't out to scar us. They're not out to destroy us. They're trying to tell us a great story. And at this point, I think losing one of our dear friends would be too distracting. It would be too overwhelming. I don't think we could focus on a good story if we were that sad. Now, don't get me wrong, character death has a strong part to play in storytelling, but there's just so much more potential in keeping great characters alive. You know, we can continue having experiences with them that way, and that means so much more than like a cheap death, or even a pretty okay death. That said, there is one comparison to bring up. The twins from Final Fantasy IV, Palom and Porom, are these goofy sorcerer types. The brother is talented but arrogant, and his sister takes him down a notch every single time he acts out. They clearly inspired our favourite idiot genius and hard-headed brat with a heart, but that actually spells bad news. So at a crucial moment in FF4, the twins sacrifice themselves to ensure the safety of the rest of the party. They aren't dead now, but they're gone. More or less until like the last couple of minutes of the game. And to make matters worse, in the launch trailer, Alphino said,
"After all, tomorrow is never promised."
That sounds I think to everyone like a death flag, but let's be honest, it wouldn't be the first time Alfie's been just a little bit melodramatic. So I'm not concerned. Well, maybe a little bit. The last bit of pertinent info is a tidbit from Thancred's Japanese voice actor. Apparently, on a live stream, he said that when he was working on his VO for Endwalker, he thought, "It seems I'll have one less job." Now, it would be career-ending bad form to drop a spoiler like that so openly he'd never work again, so we'll assume that Thancred just doesn't have a role to play in whatever adventure comes next. And with this as context, I think Ishikawa's goodbye might just be, well, either us seeing the souls of the departed one last time, or maybe we're simply saying goodbye as each of us embark on a new adventure. After all, FF14 is an MMO, and every MMO player has felt this at some point. You know, your party changes as time moves on. Old friends take up different roles. We find new party members to join us in exchange. For everyone who goes offline for the last time, either to fight battles IRL or, I guess, in other games, we just find a sprout to take on new content with. And I think that's one of the richness of MMOs. So I don't think we have to worry, at least not that much. But to be honest, thinking that way makes MMOs feel really special. But anyway, let's move on.
Finished. Let expanse contract. Eon become instant.
Our nature as warriors of light is to make friends and allies. I think that theme is what makes FF14 feel so special as an MMO, especially now that it's literally woven into the narrative through Azim. But even before that, it kind of underpins the entire Hydaelyn and Zodiark arc so far. Everywhere we go, we use the power of the Echo, which is basically the power of, understanding, to help people, and then in turn receive their help when we need it. Instead of relying on a greater power like Hydaelyn or Zodiark, we rely on our own and that of our friends. The collective versus God, in a way. In that vein, Azim was unique as an ancient. They were allied to neither Zodiark or Hydaelyn, and even in their last moments, they appear to have set off in search of the real solution to the final days, instead of panicking or relying on a solution that required sacrifice. I mean, they were always an outlier. They disregarded the entire idea of non-intervention to actually save people, even if they did pretend they were just doing it to save the grapes. So how do we fit into this equation? That's the fun thing. We actually don't. I mean, as the source shard of Azim, we did end up as Hydaelyn's chosen, stereotypical warrior of light, mother crystal stuff, all that shit. But another of Azim's shards was chosen, very loosely speaking, by Zodiark. So, if you think about it from an Azim kind of standpoint, we are the warrior of light and of darkness. And then if you think about it, Hydaelyn's blessing of light has saved us against the Ascian threat at times, and it does keep us from being tempered, but generally speaking, our true power is, like I was saying earlier, is to use the echo, to understand others, become their friends, and that's how we're strong. It's how we survived Elidibus. We actually made friends with Emmett Selk at the end of the day. I mean, okay, even though it's because of Hydaelyn we have the echo, I feel like it being a power that anyone can have is thematically so much more important to our character and our role in the world than just simply being the enforcer of Hydaelyn's will. What I'm sort of trying to say is that Hydaelyn has definitely been our ally, but at the end of the day, she's just another primal. Despite being her chosen for years, we don't really know her motives all that well. We know she was summoned as a counterpart to Zodiark, but that's about it. Obviously, we're going to learn a lot more about Hydaelyn and Endwalker, through the Lady of the Light, who is definitely Venat, by the way. You're fooling no one with that bullshit. Not that they're really trying, I hope. But anyway, we know we're enemies of Zodiark. The Convocation, who summoned him, viewed Azim as a traitor and as a heretic. But as we've learned, light and darkness can't exist without the other. What happens in a world with Hydaelyn at full power, and when Zodiark is dead, I don't think we want to see that. What Heavensward and Shadowbringers has been very clearly building towards is that Hydaelyn and Zodiark are two sides of the same coin. Zodiark tempered his creators basically immediately, and he was created and designed from the get-go to have total control. Hydaelyn, on the other hand, just kind of guides us and empowers us. She wants us to be free, but is it really freedom if it's freedom enforced by a god? They both use mortals as weapons and as enforcers of their will, and I think Azim's the sort who wants nothing to do with that. I think if Hydaelyn and the Zodiark arc is to end, it'll be with the reins of history back in the hands of man. Yes, that's a reference to Final Fantasy XII. In FF12, there are a series of ancient immortal beings called the Ikuria, who believe themselves to be gods. Their leader, Gerun, is extremely controlling, and he works behind the scenes to ensure that the history of man is decided by the Ikuria and the Ikuria alone. He's our very obvious allegory to Zodiark and the Ascians. And if you recognize the name, yes, it's referenced in the Gerun Oracles, which is the apocryphal book that Elidibus and Urianger both agree is truth. And if both of they agree it's true, it likely is. Also, Gerun is ancient Greek for oldest, so it's almost certainly an Ascian name. Now, going back to FF12, Gerun is directly opposed by the heretic Venat. Yes, Venat. She sets the plot of FF12 in motion by giving the secret of powerful crystals, the Nethicite, to the Empire. Her goal was to empower man to take control of their own destiny, which is clearly a benevolent goal. That's a good thing. It ultimately worked, but it was by giving power to the antagonists of the game. It's the equivalent of Hydaelyn making Gaius her warrior of light back in the day. What Venat is doing in 12 is what Hydaelyn is doing in 14. She's granting us power to oppose the rule of Gerun, but in the past, we stood alone as Azim. The Convocation summoned Zodiark. Venat's opposing faction summoned Hydaelyn. But we were running around saving grips. Oh, and people, of course. We were doing what matters. Which is all to say that the Hydaelyn and Zodiark arc thematically is heading to a climax where the entire light-dark dichotomy either comes together or is completely destroyed, and all that will remain of the Ancients and Azim will be the creed that we once stood for. To wander, to travel, and to be again a shepherd to the stars. And in that, we might have a very interesting ally. It's time to talk about Espers again. Fandaniel is the protector in FF12 lore. He's the counterpart to Hashmal, the bringer of order. For every Ascian we've seen connected to an Esper, their Ascian glyph comes from the black portions of the Esper glyphs, but also flipped 180. Fandaniel, though, uses a section out of the opposite colour, the white fragment, and completely unflipped. So going back to what Yoshi-P said about mystery novels, he said if something feels off, it's a clue. So what's the clue about Fandaniel then? Well, the launch trailer has him speaking to Zodiark, saying,
There must be a way to restore things to the way they were.
So what's the actual truth behind him? Well, the Esper glyph says it all. The Espers in 12 were created by the Ocuria, but the 12 Scions of Darkness rebelled against the creators, against their gods. And the Ascians, who are named after the Scions of Light, are tempered by Zodiark and follow his will. They're very pro-god. Fandaniel, however, is named for a Scion of Light, so he should be pro-Zodiark, but he uses the opposite glyph and is anti-Zodiark. That sets him up as like an anti-Ascian and, in FF12 terms, an anti-Ocuria. I have no idea how this will actually go, whether he is Chaos incarnate or he does, in some childish way want to go back to the pre-Zodiark days, but I think there's more to Danny Boy than meets the eye. Choosing the body of Asahi, that notorious two-faced little bastard, was very fucking intentional. Fuckers. But let's move on and talk about one big hint we were given. Platinum. Platinum is a colour that represents Endwalker's main theme, according to Yoshi-P. Even the marketing and PR team were puzzled by what he actually meant when he said it, but with a bit of research, it feels kind of simple. So platinum in alchemy looks like this. It was thought to be an amalgamation of silver and gold back in the day, which represented the moon and the sun. Now, remember Endwalker's initial launch was timed with a lunar eclipse, which is when the sun and moon are in, complete alignment. Also, the moon's red, like the lunar cry from FF8 and the red moon in FF4. And in Endwalker's Japanese title, Gogetsu no Finale, Gogetsu means dawn moon, but it can also be read Akatsuki, which means red moon. So let's look at the ways to read this. As the moon and the sun, it could mean that we, Asm, who are represented by the sun constellation, as you'll know, will join with the moon, which is Zodiark. But if you focus on the colour instead, which is kind of a greyish white, it could be considered the amalgam of light and dark instead. So how Hydaelyn and Zodiark are two parts of a whole. But I definitely feel it means us and Zodiark will find a compromise. I don't believe Hydaelyn or Zodiark will make it out of Endwalker, but as an overarching theme, given FF's history with the moon, and Asm being the sun, I really, really look forward to it. But for now, we have a new development to discuss. Square Enix uploaded the 1.0 trailer. That's definitely not something done at this time without at least some serious intentionality behind it. For a start, it obviously honours the failed beginnings, of course, but it also reminds us of the story. So the trailer, if you're unfamiliar, shows Midgard Summer defending Silvertear Lake from the Garleans. Now, Midi wins the battle, but the resultant ceruleum explosion from the Agrius kills him and breaks the seal on Silvertear, which is that big explosion. It releases a ton of ether, and it seems to release the primals, or maybe just the concept of the primals. So what was he protecting? The answer is probably Hydaelyn, or something at least close to her, since she left him in charge of its actual defense. Like with Zodiark on the moon, Hydaelyn might actually be sequestered deep below the planet itself, or given the first has a massive lake in the same place, but on Norvrant it's called the Source as opposed to Silvertear. Perhaps it's the connection point between the shards, which means it's a way to access the ethereal sea, which of course would lead us to Hydaelyn anyway, but it's just a little bit more. Something tells me that's the secret behind the crystal area that we see in the launch trailer. It's the ethereal sea below Silvertear. That then raises the question of why primals were escaping it in the 1.0 trailer. Maybe Hydaelyn was playing the careful mother role and keeping us safe by locking away all of those dangerous ideas, but it's also called Silvertear. We represent the gold part of Platinum, the sun constellation. So if we go to Silvertear, does that mean Platinum? It's also worth mentioning the original plans of 1.0, because they involved a presence under Silvertear, and Koji's language suggests that it will still be relevant, because in 2018 he said he couldn't say more. The Garleans weren't beaten by Midgard Summer alone, but because a force down there was overwhelming. And that means it could quite obviously be the source of the sound, the bringer of the final days, being down there. Be that an enemy from afar like Chrono Trigger's Lavos, or maybe it's the very star itself, crying at the abuse of Aether by the citizenry. The former, of course, would lead into Midgard Sormr and Omega's origins, as well as the Dragon Star. And then the latter would inspire like an old-fashioned exploration of other continents for like a proper solution to a local problem. We've looked into the past for so long when we're playing the game. I think it's time we look ahead. And we are travelers after all. The last thing I want to bring up is the walking head and shoulders advert himself, Zenos. If you've played FF10, you know that Anima is a creature born of like a deeply tragic desire for power. Now, I struggle to come up with anything solid because Zenos and the Reaper story stuff is a big question mark overall, but I just want to get one possibility out there. Zenos' tragedy is revealed to us in full form early enough. We end up bonding with him as a villain like we did with Emmett, but he's already way beyond the pale. He goes way too far into Reaperdom, and whatever he does with the Void Scent turns him into Anima. Or maybe he absorbs Venat, and we have no choice but to absorb Zodiark. In other words, join Sun and Moon together to become Platinum. There's actually logic behind this, by the way. Zenos is obsessed with the hunt, and Venat's name comes from the Latin for hunt. That's one connection. But the other one is that Zenos is extremely like FF12's Vayne, who, at the end of the game, fused with Venat, the Ikuria, to become the final boss. At any rate, I've been going for a while, so I think I'll call it here. Endwalker is going to be clearly full of explosive revelations, but I hope I provided enough food for thought today. Now, this is clearly only a very small fraction of what's going on. I mean, I didn't talk about how the 13th ties into it, or anything about Thavnair, or any of the secrets at Radz-at-Han or under at Labyrinthos, so maybe I'll get to talk some more about them on Thursday stream before the game goes live, but I mean, anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon.